Okay, so the first position that we're going to be working in here is going to be the C position. Okay, C is the first letter of caged, therefore we're going to start out in the C position. Alright, we're going to be in the key of G major / E minor because that's the same key that we've been working in throughout this series so far. So, in order to determine what the C position is in the key of G major, you need to figure out what the one chord is in the C shape. So in the key of G major, your one chord is G. Okay, so if you were to take your G chord and play the C shape of it, that would be found right here. Okay, so that's G major in the C shape, therefore this is the C position in the key of G major. Okay, the equivalent pentatonic position is this. Okay, so that's the position we're going to be working in for the first 4 exercises. Okay, now the chord progression that I'm going to be soloing over consists of G major, D major, and C major, and it sounds like this. And that just loops over and over. Notice how on the 1, each chord changes on the 1. So it's G, 2, 3, 4, D, 2, 3, 4, C, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, G. Okay? So, the first exercise for this position, you have to stick only to pentatonic. Okay? No notes outside of the pentatonic, no notes to the left, no notes to the right, no added diatonic notes, and don't worry about chord tones right now, okay? Just play the pentatonic position and noodle around all you want in the pentatonic position right here. The one rule is, though, that as the G occurs, every time the progression starts over and the G hits on the 1, you must land on the G. You must land on the note G. Okay? It doesn't matter what you do on beats 2, 3, and 4. of the G chord. It doesn't matter what you do when the D chord or the C chord is occurring. It just matters that as the G starts over on the 1, you must land on the note G, okay? And that's basically it. And then you just have to stick within the pentatonic. You can't play anything else other than the pentatonic scale in this position, okay? So that's going to sound and look like this. Okay, so that's your first exercise. Notice I just played nothing but pentatonic. I wasn't focusing on chord tones, and every time that the G occurred, I made sure to land on the note G within this pentatonic scale, okay? If you were looking at the, the diagram on the screen, the notes G were highlighted in red, okay? So anytime the note G was there, that was the red note. So you have a G here, and you have a G here. Okay, so that is it for exercise number 1. Let's move on to exercise number 2 now. Okay, exercise number 2, we're going to be soloing over the exact same chord progression, G, D, C. We're going to be playing the exact same position, this pentatonic position, which is also the C position. But now we're going to be focusing on chord tones. However, the rules are a little bit different. The rules this time are you must land on a chord tone for the underlying chord as the chord is occurring on the 1. So it's G, 2, 3, 4, D, 2, 3, 4, C, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, G, okay? So as the G chord hits on the 1, you have to land on any chord tone of the G, okay? So it can be a G, it can be a B, or it can be a D, okay? It could be any of the notes of the G, okay? Your shape is right here. And then you have this chord tone available, and you have this chord tone, and you have this chord tone, okay? So any note of the G, as the G is occurring, doesn't matter what you do on beats 2, 3, and 4, just as long as you land on a note in the G chord. Same thing for the D chord, and then the same thing for the C chord, okay? So, within this position, your G shape is here, or your C shape of your G chord is here. And then you have your D chord in this shape, which is the G shape, and you have your C chord in this shape, which is the E shape, okay? So you have a little map of your available chord tones. Now there's one exception to the rules here. You have to stick within this pentatonic position. So for every one of these exercises, you must stick to the pentatonic position that you're supposed to be working in. However, if you see an available chord tone of the underlying chord that you're attempting to hit, 1 fret to the left or 1 fret to the right, you're allowed to move away from your position only by 1 fret in either direction, okay? So just keep that in mind, because a lot of times when you're playing this pentatonic stuff, you're going to see these chord shapes are just going to start to kind of light up. You know, you're just going to see the chord shapes, and if you happen to see it and it's 1 fret away from where you're at, that's okay. Okay, you're allowed to move away from your position 1 fret, but that's it. Alright, other than that, you must stick to this position, and you must hit a chord tone of the underlying chord on the 1 beat as the chord is occurring. Okay, so that's going to sound like this. So that's roughly what it looks like. I stayed in that position. I was hitting chord tones every time the chord occurred, and I was doing anything I want on the beats 2, 3, and 4. Just as long as on the one of each chord, I had to make sure that I hit the correct chord tone of the correct underlying chord, and then I was using this position here as my path to walk from one chord to the next. I was also using the chord shapes as a different path, okay? So instead of using the scalar path, which kind of tends to move linearly or horizontally, you can use the chord shapes as your path, which kind of gives you a vertical path to move, okay? So you can do that, but I still followed the rules that I said, and that's that. That was exercise 2 for this position. Okay, so exercise 3 for this position. Now we're going to be focusing on minor. Okay, we're now going to switch the key from G major to its relative minor, E minor. Okay, we're going to be using the same chord progression, but instead of the G major chord, we're now going to be playing the E minor chord. Okay, and this chord progression is going to sound a little sadder than the previous chord progression because minor tends to sound sad, major tends to sound happy. So this chord progression sounds like this. Okay, so that's this chord progression. So exercise 3, we're doing the exact same thing as exercise 1, just sticking to pentatonic. You can't do anything else other than pentatonic, but you have to land on the note E as the E minor chord is occurring right on the one beat. Okay, so every time the progression starts over and the E minor chord starts over, you have to hit the note E. Okay, so that is going to sound like this. Something like that. So, as you saw, instead of landing on the G, which is the tonic note of the previous two, now the tonic note is E. The notes are still the same, we're still in the same position, we're still the same pentatonic position. Now we're focusing on that E note every time the E minor chord was occurring. Okay, so that's exercise 3. Okay, so exercise 4, again, as you probably guessed, exercise 4 is going to be just like exercise 2, only now we're in this minor key, okay? It's the relative minor of the major key. It's E minor, which is relative to G major. So, but the rules are still going to be the same. As the E minor chord occurs right on the one beat, you must hit a chord tone of the E minor chord. Same thing for the D major chord, same thing for the C major chord, okay? So, we already know where our D major and C major falls into this position. We have our D major here, okay, in this G shape. We have our C major here, and our E minor is in this shape here, okay? It's in this A minor shape. So we have these available chord tones, and we also have a couple extra chord tones available too for the E minor chord. Okay, so the same rules as part 2. Let's hear how that sounds. Okay. See how it had kind of a darker feel to it, kind of a sadder feel to it, however you want to describe it, but it had a different feel to it than the major progression, okay? Notice the framework was the same, the rules were the same as the major examples, only now we were playing in its relative minor, okay? So those are the 4 exercises for the C position. Now the same rules and the same 4 exercises are going to be applied to all of the rest of the caged positions, but I don't need to go ahead and explain the rules because you already know them. So let's get on to the next position, which is the A position. Alright, so now the next 4 set of exercises are in the A position. Okay, G major chord in the A position is right here. Associated pentatonic position is this. Okay, same rules apply. We're going to start out just pentatonic, and we must land on the note G every time the G chord occurs, and that is going to sound like this. Okay, exercise 2 for this position, same thing. You must hit a chord tone as the chord is occurring. You must stay within this pentatonic position. However, you're allowed to shift 1 fret away if you see an available chord tone. Okay, so I'm allowed to shift 1 fret in this direction, or if I want to, I can shift 1 fret in that direction away from this pentatonic area. Okay, but I still have to hit my chord tones. So let's hear how that sounds. Okay, so that was the major example of chord tone soloing in that position. Now let's get on to the 2 minor examples of the same things. Alright, so now we're on the minor examples in this position, and we're going to start out with just pentatonic, and I have to hit the note E as the E is occurring, like we did before. So let's hear how that sounds. Okay, not too bad. Just staying in that pentatonic position, hitting the note E as the E minor chord occurred right on the 1. Now for the chord tone soloing exercise. Okay, so the chord tone soloing exercise in this position. So if you recall from part 6, this position is a little tough because we're working, there's no 6 chord that fits right in here, and there's no 4 chord that fits right in here. So in this key, E minor is our 6 chord, and C major is our 4 chord. So there isn't any perfect shape for those 2 chords. However, like I said, you're allowed to move 1 fret away from the position in either direction if you need to. Okay? So let's see how this works with the chord tone soloing. Okay, nice little sad progression there again. That was the A shape. And as you can see, even though there wasn't any pretty minor chord shape that fit right in there, or any pretty chord for the C chord, I was still able to locate chord tones because I'm able to see the neighboring positions. I'm able to see that there's a C here. I'm able to see that there's a C here. I was able to see that there's an E minor here. Okay, and this is one of the chord tones of the E minor as well. And I was able to see that there's an E minor here. Okay, so even though there's no direct chord shape right in this position for certain chords, once you start seeing them, once the chord tones start to light up, you start to see the neighboring positions, which allows you to work within one position and still hit chord tones. Okay, so that is it for the A position. Now we move on to the G position. Okay, so now we're going to do the same 4 exercises, and we're going to be in the G position, which is right here, 12th to 15th fret, also which I refer to as the home box. You have your G chord in the G shape, therefore it's the G position. Okay, and then you have your C chord in the C shape. You have your D chord in the D shape. This is a hard one to play. And you have your E minor chord in the E minor shape. Okay, and our pentatonic box is. Okay, so that is our position that we're going to be working on, the G position. So let's get started with the major example. Put that rhythm back onto major key. So that's going to sound like this. pentatonic scale, always landing on the G as the G chord is occurring. Okay, now focusing on chord tones in the major key. So we have G, D, and C. Must hit a chord tone as the chord is occurring. Anything else I want to do in between is fine. Okay, so let's hear how that sounds. Okay, nice pretty chord stuff. Major key, G, D, C. Now let's move on to the minor examples. All right, so now we're going to do the minor examples for the G position. Okay, so for the first one, it's just pentatonic, but we have to land on the note E as the E minor chord occurs. So that's going to sound like this. Okay, really getting the feel of that pentatonic, really hearing it, really understanding where the note E is. Okay, hopefully you're starting to understand the purpose of these exercises by now. Okay, so that is exercise 3 for the G position. Now we're going to do exercise 4 for the G position, which is the chord tone stuff. Alright, so here's exercise 4, where I'm now targeting chord tones, where I have to hit the chord tone on the 1 of each beat, of each chord. Alright, so that's going to sound like this. Okay, something like that. That was the minor, the E minor in that position. Now we move on to the, what position are we at? C, A, G. We're on the E position. Okay, so now the 4 exercises for the E position. Alright, so moving right along here with the caged positions, we started out with the C position, then we did the A position, then we did the G position. Now we're on the E position because that's the next letter in the word caged. Okay, so here's your G major chord in the E position, or in the E shape, but this is a little high up here, so let's bring it down here to the 3rd fret. Same thing, E position down here. Okay, and then our respective pentatonic position is right here. Okay, so you have a G there, you have a G here, and you have a G here. Same exercises as before. Let's start off with the pentatonic, and we have to land on the G note every time the G occurs. So let's hear how that sounds. Okay, landing on the note G every time the G occurred. Nothing but pentatonic. Now let's do the chord tone soloing stuff. Alright, now we do the chord tone soloing stuff for the E position. Okay, still in a major key. Chords are G, D, and C. Your major chord, your 1 chord is here, your G chord. Your 5 chord is in the C shape, which is the D. And your 4 chord is right here in the E shape, which is the C. Okay, so those are your chord tones. Let's hear how this sounds in this position. Okay, so that's the chord tone soloing in that position in the major key. Now we move on to the minor key in this position. Okay, exercise 3 for this position. Starting just doing the pentatonic, landing on the E as the E minor occurs. We have an E here, we have an E here. So we have to hit those, or either one of those E's. Okay, so let's hear how this sounds. Kind of doing a little pull-offs and hitting the open strings there, so technically that put me out of the pentatonic position, but you get the point, okay? Alright, so now for the exercise 4. Alright, so exercise 4 here, we're doing the chord tone stuff in the minor key, okay? So you have, we already know where our 1 and 2 chords are, we already know where our 4 and 5 chords are. We have our C here, we have our D here, and then we have this E minor right here. Okay, so it's E minor to the D to the C. Alright, so let's hear how this chord tone stuff sounds for this. Okay, so there's the chord tone soloing in the key of E minor in that E position there. Okay, so now we just have one more position left, and that is the D position. Alright, so here's our final position here, and this is the D position. Okay, so G major chord, your one chord in the D shape looks like this. Okay, and this is your respective pentatonic position. Okay, so you have a G here, and you have a G here, and here's your G major chord. So now let's do the 4 exercises again and see how this sounds. Okay, for now it's just pentatonic, focusing on your note G and the pentatonic scale. Okay, just playing around in that pentatonic position, only pentatonic, making sure I land on the note G each time. Now for the second exercise. Okay, here's exercise 2 for this position, and we know our G chord is here, right here in this shape. Okay, and then turn to lay off, G chord is here. Our C chord is found in the G shape in this position. And our D chord is found in, the A shape. Okay, so we have our G, we have our D, and we have our C. Okay, so let's do the chord tone stuff now. Okay, so that was chord tone soloing for the major. Now let's go to the 2 exercises for the minor, and then that's it. Okay, so now we're doing just pentatonic, and we're focusing on the note E. So we have an E here, and we have an E here. Okay, so those are 2 E notes, and we're in the pentatonic only, no chord tones. Okay, except for the E. So we go. so that was just pentatonic in E minor. Now we move on to our last example. Alright, so here's our last exercise for this. This is the 20th exercise, and we are now focusing on chord tones in E minor in this last pentatonic position right here. So let's see how this sounds. Note that there's no perfect E minor shape here. You have an E minor shape here, and you have an E minor shape here, but nothing right in this pentatonic position, so we just have to see the surrounding shapes, okay? So let's hear how this sounds. Okay, and that's the chord tone soloing for that position in the minor key. Okay, so that's it. That is all 20 exercises, all 5 positions. We did all 5 caged positions, and we worked with the respective pentatonic position for each one. Okay, now the reason I did this exercise in this manner has several different benefits. Okay, number one, first of all, you get to really understand each pentatonic position and get really good at each pentatonic position, which spans the entire fretboard. So if you know all your pentatonic positions, you can, in any given key, you can solo up and down the entire fretboard using just the pentatonic scale. Okay, so although the pentatonic scale is not always ideal, it's always something to fall back on, okay? It'll always work, assuming that all of the chords in the progression are in the key, okay? But that's the one benefit. The second benefit is you really get to relate the chord tones and the caged shapes to each of the pentatonic positions. Okay, so as we went over in part 6, each of the pentatonic positions has the available chord tones within it, okay? So each of the caged positions, you really get comfortable with that, okay? And we did this for the most important chords that you're going to find in any diatonic key. We used the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord, and the 6 chord, okay? The 6 chord is the E minor, okay? So you now, if you work on this exercise, you can play across the entire fretboard in either pentatonic, or you can focus on chord tones, or you can switch back and forth. You can think in scalar terms, or you can think in chord tone terms, and you can mix and match as you please across the entire span of the fretboard. And if you can do it in the key of G/E minor, you can do it for any key, okay, because the patterns are always going to be the same relative to one another, okay? Third, this really helps to get you to understand the concept of the relative minor, okay? So some people are still confused by this whole relative minor thing. They don't understand that G major and E minor contain the exact same notes, with the only difference being the tonic note. But as we worked through this exercise, you saw the framework for each position, the available chord tones, all that stuff is exactly the same. The only difference is the location of the tonic note, okay? And of course, when we're doing the chord tone stuff, instead of focusing on the G major chord tones, we were focusing on the E minor chord tones. And even that, the E minor and the G major share some common chord tones, as I'm sure you realized, okay? So this really helps to solidify your understanding of the relative major-minor concept. So anyway, that was a long lesson, 20 exercises. Go over the exercises. If you have any questions or if I left anything out, feel free to ask, and I'll get back to you. Thanks a lot.